Hello, my name's Sam. It's nice to meet you. I look forward to doing some embroidery with you today. First I want to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land which I live and work on, who are the Wurundjeri, Woiwurrung and Bunurong peoples of the Kulin Nation. I pay my respects to their elders, past, present and emerging, and acknowledge that this land was never ceded. On that note, let's get our hands washed and get into it. But first we're in my messy bathroom because it's important to wash your hands between activities, even at home. So for this you'll need a drawing, something dark to trace over it with, a pencil, some sticky tape, some fabric, an embroidery hoop, embroidery needle and some embroidery thread. So I've realised that my measuring tape is exactly 1.5 meters long, which makes it perfect for measuring social distancing. Perfect. Additionally, it can be good to have scissors because when you have thread you do need to cut it, and an iron. Let's do some embroidery. I have drawn a template of what I want to embroider already. I've just started in pencil so far. Come have a look. It looks like this so far. Just want to show you guys this. I'm very proud of myself. I don't have equipment, but I'm making it work. Alright, let's get into it. So I stuck it to the window so that we can trace with the light behind. It's kind of like a light box that you don't have to buy, but you do have to wait for the sun to be out. So I'm just going to take my fabric to the window, basically, over the top so I can see through it, and then I'll trace. This is my piece of fabric. I'm using brown because that's what I've got. Also, it'll look great with colours anyway. Before you start your embroidery, it's important to figure out how large your piece of fabric needs to be. To do that, you need to know what you want to do with it. So I want to make a hanging out of this one. To do that, I want a piece of fabric that is as wide as my piece, plus a little bit on the edges either side for seam allowance. And I want it to be as long as my piece, plus enough at the top that I can work out the hanging, and enough at the bottom that I can trim it to whatever size I think looks good at the time. Because I'm making it into a hanging, I want to do the embroidery on what will end up being the front. So if you imagine there's like a rod through the top there, I want my embroidery to be here, which actually means I want to do it on the bottom of this piece of fabric. Alright. It's a bit tricky on darker fabrics, but you can actually see the outline. So I'm going to go ahead and trace it. So there are a few options as to what you want to use when you're tracing it. My go-to is a pencil. It's very simple. It works. Washes off. The only time I don't use it is if the fabric is too dark for me to see it on. Another option are these weird friction pens. You can just like draw on the fabric and then you heat it up with an iron and the marker disappears, so that's pretty cool. One good option for darker fabrics is tailor's chalk, which usually comes in weird little pellets like this. But you can also get just various other things. This is my favourite at the moment. It's just like a crayon version of tailor's chalk, and you just wind it up and it's great on dark fabrics and it just washes off. Use whatever you can, whatever you have access to, and whatever's gonna work. If you don't have weird fancy crayons and tailor's chalk and stuff, just be a bit careful to pick a lighter fabric that you can see a pencil on, and then you're good to go. So I did use pencil. It's a bit dark, but you can see it. So now I'm going to pop our traced fabric onto an embroidery hoop. So just unscrew the top, pop out the middle. Middle goes at the back. The other bit goes over the top. Screw it tight again so there's some tension there. And then just pull the fabric tight. You don't have to fit the whole drawing into the embroidery hoop, you can sew it piece by piece. So you don't have to have a massive embroidery hoop to do a massive embroidery. So you just want to grab some thread to get started with. I wouldn't grab too much more than that because it starts to get unwieldy. Just tie a knot at the other end. I'm just going to stab it in through the back. Cool. And then back through. Cool. So that's all I wanted to do with that coloured thread in that spot. So I'm just going to flip it over and tie it off. So I usually just tie it to whatever's closest to it. I tend not to pull too tight because that'll wrinkle up the fabric when you take it off the stretcher. So I thread it under there. Now I've made a loop. Put this through the loop. Now I have another loop. So I'm just pulling that first loop tight. And then I'm just going to put this through the loop one more time, holding on to that. Now I've made another loop. Pull the first one tight again. And just hold it down with my fingers so it's nice and flat. And pull it all the way through. That should be a nice neat little knot. Beautiful. Try not to cut too close to the knot because sometimes it can just undo if you cut it really, really close. But yeah, that's nice and secure and pretty and done. I'm just going to repeat that for the black thread. I don't actually have to go that far between this piece and the piece I want to embroider next, and that will be true for all of the black bits because they're all pretty close together. So I'm just going to pull the thread behind and go down to the next bit. Anyway, I'm just going to keep going like this till I've done all of the black spots that I can. I am sorry for the cat noises. They live here too, you know? So I have finished up all the black stitching that I can reach with the hoop in this place. I'm going to do some yellow stitching down the side of the banana. I have my string with my knot in the end. Just going to pass it through. I'm just following the line that we traced. I just want to bring this back to close that gap. So this is the way I do this stitch. I do one stitch forward, one stitch back. That way I get a nice even line along. Just trying to keep my stitches the same size. got to the end of what I can do with the hoop in this spot, so I'm just going to move it. Unscrew it at the top. Move the circle bit down. I've got a bit of writing here, so I want to get that in. And then just pop it back over the top. Tighten it up again. Banana is complete. Let's do some words. When I embroider words, I tend to find that just this embroidery strand as it is too thick, or it's very thick and the word ends up a bit bubbly. But if you can focus, good. If you actually have a look at embroidery strands, embroidery thread, they're made up of about 6 strands. I like to use 3 or 4. 4 is my favorite number for like these smaller strands for embroidering words. So I'm just going to take 2 off the strand. Just doing that by pulling. And then at the end of it, I have some embroidery thread which is only 4 strands wide. So I don't have any tricks to embroidering words. Sometimes I feel like I've just got the right number of stitches in the right place to really make the letters look natural and handwritten, and sometimes I just mess it up. The cool thing about embroidery is that it's so forgiving, like you can just unpick it and do it again. As you can see, I didn't super like the first way I did this B. Curved letters are very tricky sometimes. So I've just cut the stitch. I can just wiggle out the thread. And do it again. That looks better. Right, it looks pretty legible to me. I'm happy with these shapes. If I wasn't, I could just redo any of them, but I am, so I'm going to tie it off. Cool. So this is another one I'm working on. So this one's a little bobbly one. It's kind of raised off the surface. I'll show you how I do that one. So I have my string. I'm going to wrap it around my needle. Put my needle into the fabric, and then it's very important that I keep tension on this string, otherwise it's just going to like unravel. And then very slowly I just pull this thread through. That one's much neater. So there, little strange bobble thing. That's a variation on a French knot if you want to look it up elsewhere. So I'm going to go ahead and do the stem in a chain stitch, which is a cool stitch that also adds a bit of texture. So I'm going to bring the needle up through where I want the stitch to start, which for me is at the bottom. Then I want to put the needle back through that same hole. But I will hold on to the thread so I end up with a little loop. Then I want to bring the needle up where I want the next stitch to start, and I want to put the loop over it. pull the thread through toward the top or away from where you're stitching from. Then I want to do the same thing, so I'm going to put the needle back through the same hole it just came through. I don't want to hold on to the thread, so I end up with a loop. Put the needle through where I want the next stitch to start. Put the loop over it and pull it up. And when you've done that a few times, start ending up with a little chain of stitches. So I'm going to go ahead and finish that off. I want to show you what happens if I pull down rather than up. So I've made my little loop, put my needle through it. I have been pulling up this direction, but if I pull back, you'll see that the loop tightens into like a much smaller loop than we want. And if you pull that way now again, it's going to make the fabric stretch in really weird ways. It's going to be really scrunched there. But it's really easy to fix if you do that by accident, because all you need to do is just loosen this loop up a little bit. So I'm going to put my needle through it and then just pull it out a bit. So now you can see it's nice and loose again, and then I'm just going to pull up. Sorted. For this last stitch, you don't want to go back through this hole, because then the loop that's resting on it's going to come undone. To finish off, I'm just going to put the needle in over the top of this last loop. So that will hold that last loop down, and then that's it. Cool. Ready to iron. So be sure to keep the iron moving. If you leave it in one spot too long, I've discovered that you can burn the material. Also make sure that it's set to the appropriate material. I'm also going to iron it from the back. If you don't feel super confident with an iron, see if there's someone around who does feel confident with an iron. The first time I used an iron, I really burnt the thing I was ironing. So it is worth getting someone to show you how to use your specific iron if you haven't already. So here it is. It looks really cute. I'm really excited about it. I hope you are too. Congratulations, you made a thing! I hope you enjoyed this process. I hope you are feeling like excited about doing something creative. You can embroider on anything that is fabric, basically. Like clothes or bags or tea towels or like curtains, whatever you want. Stretchy fabrics are going to be a little bit trickier to embroider on, but not impossible. I hope you have fun with it. Good luck. Everybody, these are both of my cats invading my desk while I'm trying to film. They're very helpful.